Superb. Good evening, everybody. Now, that's not my big hand that I'm holding up there. There's my real hand, in case you're wondering. But Carl's not going to be able to do that for the whole of this webinar. Good evening and welcome to Ask the Expats about worldwide money transfers. And of course, the experts are Spartan FX, and Sarah Davey is here from Spartan FX. Good evening to you, Sarah. How's it going?
Good evening. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
It must be very exciting in your office at the moment. Great news currently for people who want to turn their US dollars into euros. I think you've been hearing from quite a few of them. How's it going at Spartan FX HQ?
Absolutely. Very busy. Really across quite a number of pairings are actually doing quite well at the moment. Sterling euros probably not as good as the rest of them, but overall we're still at good levels. So we thought we'd start with that. Do you want me to share the graphs now?
Great. Yeah. If you've got some graphs for us, how exciting. So we'll start with a bit of a currency update on those pairings. Please do make sure you're at least, well, tell your friends, anyone who's interested in moving to Portugal, as we know many are. That fantastic LA Times article this week. But 3 levels of membership at expatsportugal.com: community membership, premium membership, and premium plus. Tell anyone who's interested in moving to Portugal that we'd be delighted to help them over there. Oh, there you go, Sarah, you good?
Can everyone see that as good? Well, I thought I'd bring some graphs along with me, make it a little bit more interesting that you're not just staring at me. But I think what's nice is that I think once you look at the graphs and you sort of look at a longer time period, you get perhaps a little bit better understanding of really how good the rates are at the moment, rather than sort of a short time period, because rates can fluctuate quite a lot, but if we actually look at it in a longer time period, this is where you'll really see that we're at quite good levels. So this is selling US dollars and buying euros. So at the moment we're at 6-year highs. You can see from the graph, kind of we've touched on it again, sort of really between 2016, 17, and then sort of back in 2015. But overall, since in the last sort of 10 years or more, you really have struggled to reach these sort of levels. So at the moment, it is still a very good time to be buying US dollars. In the last 12 months, the US dollars gained about 16% against the euro. Why has this happened? Why has it strengthened? Why has the euro weakened? The US dollar is known as a safe haven currency. And what that means is that when anything's happening, there's global issues, there's uncertainty, people will pull out of what they see as riskier assets and move them into safer options, which is US dollar, for example, is seen as a safer option. And that's what's really strengthened the US dollar. At the moment, really what's driving the markets is, unfortunately, the Ukraine and Russian war. You've got sort of still a bit of COVID happening, obviously lockdowns that have happened in China. You've got economic growth worries, but also inflation and interest rate hikes. So a lot going on at the moment, which is why we've seen the US dollar strengthen. As I said, despite a lot of things easing in a lot of countries, we're still seeing a little bit of a reverse happening in China. They're still worried about their COVID levels, and that's cause for concern for their economic growth. We had COVID, now we've got the war. We've still got a lot of global supply chain issues, restrictions. Even sort of here in the UK, we keep getting told certain products we're going to struggle to get because of where they're coming from. Also, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be too much of a sign of this war ending, and there's still a lot of sanctions that have been imposed by Russia and on Russia. So even when things do end, there'll still be more of an impact on the global economy going forward as well, which we have to bear in mind. Inflation, interest rate hikes, that's really what I said in the beginning was a hot topic for 2020, and that's obviously before the Ukraine and Russian war. So there's a lot of sort of pressure, certainly in the UK at the moment, and it's a similar thing that's happening in the US as well. Fed may look to raise interest rates again, but the economic data is perhaps having a little effect. It's really the other things that are really dictating the market there. So good time if you're selling US dollars and you're buying euros. So then if we go on to, here we go. So if we're selling sterling and we're buying euros, in the last sort of few months, we've been really kind of going backwards and forwards between strength of sterling and strength of euro, because we're in a little bit of a similar crisis, really, as in at the moment, the cost of living crisis in the UK is huge. It's really affecting households and businesses, energy prices. Inflation is sort of the highest in 40 years, and the Bank of England's warning of a recession, perhaps early 2023. But equally, it's similar things happening in the Eurozone as well. The Eurozone is heavily reliant on Russian gas, for example, and we've just seen that Bulgaria and Poland have just been cut off recently because they failed to pay in rubles. So similar things are happening in both countries from that perspective. The UK has raised interest rates recently, but the comments on the back of that show that they are hesitant and cautious with future decisions, which is where we saw the pound weaken a little bit. Again, Europe, it's probably the interest rates are lowest in most of the developed countries, economies, but they're talking about raising their interest rates, and that could strengthen the euro. So again, we're a little bit backwards and forwards there. I think if you have deadlines and you're looking to maybe buy a property, or a certain amount that you need to pay by a certain time, that's maybe where you want to start thinking about how much it's costing you, what's your budget on that, what have you budgeted for, and that's where we can maybe help look at, is it a good time to be buying those euros now, because it's perhaps a little bit of a different story if you're selling US dollars, Canadian dollars, or Australian dollars. If we just look briefly at the Canadian dollar, because I know we've got a few Canadian members for Expats Portugal as well. Again, great news, we're at 7-year highs for selling your Canadian dollar and buying euros. And again, we look at the Australian dollar briefly. We have dropped off a little bit slightly, but if you look back over the last 5 years, we are still at relatively good levels for selling your Aussie dollars and buying your euros. So I'll stop that.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Very, very, very thoughtful to include the loonie in there. I always say that when I get the chance. And our Canadian and Australian members as well. Yeah, so thank you very much for that. So let's talk more about Spartan FX and what you can do for people. And you often use the example of being able to pay the pool man, the person who cleans the pool, and they need paying in euros, and that can be a small amount that you can manage. But then, of course, there's the house purchase. You're comfortable with either kind of transaction, right?
Absolutely. I mean, on your journey to Portugal, there's so many different things that you might need to pay for, whether that be, as you said, you're paying for the NIF, you're paying for a visa, whether that be something like D7 or your golden visa, you're maybe renting a property, buying a car. We've had people pay art galleries, interior designers, you're paying fees to lawyers. The list really does go on. So there's lots of things to consider, and usually when people think about moving money, it's low on the list, which I appreciate. The main things obviously is you're getting your visa, when we're going to move to. Moving your money normally is moved quite far down on the list, but there's so many different things that you actually do need to move money for, that really it's worthwhile considering them and start moving that a little bit higher up the list, because as we've seen at the moment, the rates are really good. So what we're seeing, especially a lot of the American customers that we're dealing with at the moment, is they're buying their euros now in advance of needing any payment. So they know that they are looking to move, they know that they will buy a property eventually, so they're buying their euros now because the rate's really good. So that's why it's worthwhile moving up the list and starting to think about it before you actually need it, because it may be that that's where you save more money, or it might be easier. And we'll get into that a little bit later about thinking about transferring your money before you actually leave your home country.
Perfect. Okay. And let's do a bit of jargon busting, which is always helpful for people who are new to the area and this sector. Spot buying, forward buying, what do these terms mean?
Yeah. So there is lots of different options. So we usually get asked a few things, as in, can I buy my euros now in advance of needing a payment, and what are my options? And the answer is yes, you can, and there are a lot of different options. So that's another reason why it's worthwhile thinking about this in advance, because you may have more options available. So if, for example, you were doing larger transfers, you do have slightly more options, but with the smaller ones, there are quite similar. So one thing, spot, is just basically buying your currency as and when you need it. So it's just a case of either giving us a call, you can go online, put in the amount that you need in euros, it tells you what that's going to cost you in sterling, US dollars, Aussie dollars, or again, we'll do that over the phone. And then you say, yep, I'd like to go ahead with that. You transfer your money. It's already been converted. As soon as the money's received, your money will be sent either to a third party or to your own account in Portugal, wherever you specify. Or we can hold money on account. So that's the other thing. You might think to yourself, really want to take advantage of the rate, but I don't have a local bank account. I'm not buying property yet. There's nowhere to send it. We can hold the euros on account for you as well. And that's free of charge. So that's not a problem. Well, that's good. The other option you've got is a forward contract, which is basically you can fix the rate today for a future payment and you only need 10% deposit. So some people are actually buying the money up front completely, but some people don't have that money available, but they still want to take advantage of the rate, and that allows them to do that. So you pay your 10% now, it's not a cost or a charge. You pay the remaining 90% when you need the money. We'll transfer it out at that point, but you fix the rate with a smaller deposit, not needed the full amount.
That's pretty good, isn't it? That's quite a service, really, to be able to secure an advantageous rate for a small deposit like that. Sorry, I might have interrupted your flow, but with this whole business of monitoring the rate and people seeing tonight, for example, wow, that's amazing. Don't know how long this is going to last for. You're showing the graphs tonight, but how are people able to access, understand the rates ongoingly? Or, is that part of the relationship with you when it comes to?
Yeah, that's part of the service that we offer. You're so busy with either your job at the moment, looking into moving to Portugal. That's what we specialize in. There's a lot more things that go into it. I mean, we use a term a lot, but nobody has a crystal ball, so no one knows exactly what's going to happen. And there are things that obviously are moving the market that are very unpredictable. That is war, natural disasters, pandemics, things like that are very difficult to predict. But there are the things that can be predicted and sometimes are priced in the market. So there's things that we're looking at around the data that's coming out. We look at past trends, and we're doing that to help forecast where we think the market's going to go. But we can certainly keep an eye on that for you and notify you both ways. One, if it's moving in your favor, but also if it's moving in you against you. And that's the thing to really bear in mind that I think sometimes people forget, is that a lot of what we do sometimes is actually protect your budget to make sure that this is still affordable for you. I can still afford that property. You're not stung with a bill that you more than what you expected. It's that side of things to think, when you start your journey to moving to Portugal, you obviously have a rate at that point that you're working all your calculations out of what that's going to cost me. But obviously that does change over time. So we're just trying to make sure we help manage that for you as well.
Oh, I see. So if somebody had €250,000 that was their budget for the house, and they're thinking of how that's working today, you would make a note of that with that client and say, come on, you probably need to do the deal now because of the way things are going. You're going to fall short of your budget. Is that the sort of level of service you're talking about?
Yeah, as I said, there is still an element of people want to achieve certain rates, and whether that's realistic within your time frame as well. That's the other thing you need to bear in mind.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Okay, good to know. And this is what done by simply sending your clients an email, or how does that? How do the alerts work?
Email or telephone, entirely up to you.
All right, superb. I see we're beginning to get questions coming in via the chat. Thank you very much for those. This is connected. If I may take it now, please, Sarah. How long can our money be held in our Spartan account if people want to put it there rather than if they haven't got their Euro bank sorted out over here?
Yeah, there's no limit. All I would say is that we aren't, because we don't operate like we would a savings account, there is no interest earned on that money. That's the only thing, but it is there. We can hold it for as long as you want, and that's for completely free of charge.
Very good. Well, if anyone does know about good interest rates at the moment, they should tell us, shouldn't they? Because I think they're a little few and far between. Okay, yeah, put that in the chat. Anybody who's got a tip on that. But we're not giving him financial advice tonight. Nobody's allowed to do that this evening. Okay, and Shamim and Amin, thank you very much for this question. How are recurring payments? I don't know if you want to take this now or work it in later on as part of what you want to share with us, Sarah. But how are recurring payments, for example, pensions, handled if Spartan was doing the conversion?
Yeah, absolutely. You've actually very quite similar. You can buy it as and when that you need it. The other thing you can do is treat them as a larger amount. So, for example, if you had a pension that you were being paid every month, say it was $2,000 US, I'm making that up, but say it was that every month, over 12 months, you're talking $24,000 US. What we could do is fix the rate for 12 months for $24,000 US. Similar to what I said about fixing the rate would be a 10% deposit. So you had that money available, we fix the rate, and every month that you get your pension, you transfer that to us and we'll draw down on that larger amount. So you can fix rates for those future payments if it was something coming in, or buy it as and when that you need it.
Okay, superb. All right, so that takes us really, doesn't it? It's the idea of you holding the money, but not being a bank with an interest rate for what it's worth at the moment. Let's compare and contrast, shall we? You know, this can be done via somebody's bank, can't it? It can be done by a broker, and I suppose the competitor that comes to mind is Wise in this area. Would you care to comment on those various scenarios and how Spartan FX it improves on the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, most of the time we find that it's generally that people first think about their bank, which is understandable. You already have an account with them, you've been using them for many years. But it is always worthwhile checking the rates of exchange. There's vast differences. Some can be quite competitive, but others can 3 to 4% difference, or even we've seen 9%. So it's always worthwhile checking out the rate. The other things to bear in mind is, one, they can't hold the euros on account for you. So if you are in the position that you want to buy those euros at the moment, where you're going to put them, you don't have that flexibility with your bank about fixing the rate or buying the euros in advance. The other thing with the bank as well is that if you get quoted a rate, that's not the rate that you're going to get when the money is transferred. That's what happens with us. We agree the rate, you know exactly how much it's costing you, you know what you'll get in euros, that's secured, and then we just wait for your money to come and then it's sent on. But with the bank, what happens is you'll get a quote, but they're just basing that on what the rate is at this very second. When you actually come to make the transfer, that's when you'll get the rate, live rate at that point in time. So what you can find is that there might not be a problem. It might be the same, similar to the rate you've been quoted. It might go up, which is great. You get more euros. But if the rate moves and you're short, not a problem if you're just moving it to your own account. But if it was for specific payment, mortgage, paying a property, buying something specific where you need a specific amount of euros, that money's going to be short. So you'll need to do another transfer to top that up. So again, that's where it's a little bit helpful that you can know the rate in advance of obviously making that payment. And the other thing that we find generally is that a lot of banks don't have really any experience. If you're especially trying to call your bank, we've had customers wait 45 minutes to 2 hours to get through to their bank, or certainly to the right person within the bank to get that quote as well. So certainly from the service perspective, it sometimes can be a little bit more difficult to deal with your bank for these kind of transfers.
Okay, superb. Yeah, and we love the anecdotes about when you finally get through to people's banks, teaching them about IBANs. You know, there's sometimes in the United States, for example, they're not familiar necessarily with the European banking system, and your perspective is global, isn't it? You know how these systems and banking conventions work the world over, so that can be quite an advantage as well.
Absolutely. It's just that reassurance, really, that you might be asked questions that you don't know the answer to. So how are you supposed to answer your bank teller and let them know what the answer is? It's just that sort of reassurance, as well as obviously the element of the more options that you've got on actually buying those euros in advance.
Yes. Okay. Well, we'll come back to Wise. We'll come back to an excellent question from Johnny Cocktail tonight. Please explain your transfer fee schedule. We'll touch on that, how Spartan get paid in the mix here. But just going back a little bit, historically, what effect does a recession have on the dollar-euro pairing? From Toby. Thank you, Toby. Thanks for being here tonight and asking that question. Is that easy to answer?
It depends where the recession's happening ultimately. What's happening is that, as the recession I was talking about was in the UK, so that might not have too much of an impact on your US dollar euro transfer. It really depends on what's happening in Europe. Obviously, we've touched on the fact that there could be more problems going forward, even if the war ends, what that looks for the European economy anyway. But perhaps in the short term, if the Ukraine and Russian war did end, then that would be seen as a positive, and then people would pull their money out of the safe havens, because there'd be more confidence, there'd be more positivity. So again, I think it boils down to your time frames. Obviously, no one knows when the war is going to end, but when it does, we may see a very quick rebound of the gains that we've seen. Again, what that looks like is that short term. How many months does that look like? And then, as I said, the knock-on effect of this war, what that's then going to look like for economies is unknown, and that's where we may see, more US dollar strength and euro weakness at that point. But again, it's just those time frames and what you're looking to do. If we're talking maybe 12 months, then that might be a different story.
Yeah. But you also said earlier on, didn't you, that the dollar is seen as a safe haven. So in the instance of global recession, you could, looking back, historically, as Toby's asking, a safe haven currency is going to be the stronger place to be.
Yeah.
So we can only speculate on that. History repeating itself. History doesn't repeat itself; it just rhymes. Some sort of indication there. So okay, let's go back to Wise then. That'll be on some people's minds, won't it? The comparison with Wise. How do you compare?
Absolutely. I mean, I always think it's personal preference. So there's a service for everyone, and we don't have a card like they have. So obviously, from a travel money sort of side, you traveling, we don't have that solution for you. Certainly from the transactions perspective, we do have an online platform, so that is an option if you did really want that. But we generally find a lot of the customers we're speaking to do actually prefer to speak to us on the telephone, or certainly speak to somebody. We've found some customers recently where they've struggled to contact Wise. I've been told by one customer that they turn off their web chat function when they get busy. So very difficult to contact them that way. We've had a customer that's come to us who needed to open the account, did the exchange, but then needed to supply some compliance documents. What he supplied, I don't think was acceptable, but there was not a lot of communication and very difficult for him to be in contact with somebody. So after a period of time, they exchanged his money back and sent the money back to him. So now he then still had to make an exchange, and he's obviously lost money on that transfer and time. So what we find is that I think if it goes straightforward, not a problem. There may be a solution for some people. I mean, I certainly know myself that, coming to make a transfer of your own money can be a little bit more daunting. And now you're talking about large sums of money, just checking, is that IBAN number correct? If there is documentation needed, usually for larger amounts, there is some compliance documentation needed. And again, it's just talking you through that and what you need. And we make sure that we have that all up front, so that there isn't no delays in your payment. So it's just there's that human element that people find quite useful. I like to see myself as quite a tech savvy person, but even I like to speak to somebody. So it's not to say that you're not capable of doing this yourself on the app, but when we've talked about the rates and what's other aspects of the transfer that you may need to consider, that's maybe where you want to speak to somebody and ask them questions, and we're here and we're available for that.
That's brilliant. Okay, and no one's asking for exclusivity, are they? You can have a Wise card as well for those high street transactions and so on, and use either or in the instance that suits you. That's fantastic. Okay, so your rates, fees. How does this work? As Johnny was asking earlier on.
Yeah, so we're very transparent. There's no transfer fees. We just make our money on the rate. So essentially, for ease, so that you understand, basically we buy at a wholesale price, it's called interbank rate, and then we sell to you. So the difference between the two is where we make our money. So it's very transparent. You can see that there, and that's it. There's no other fees. There's no transfer fees. It's just on the rate of exchange.
Okay, very straightforward. Thank you for that, Sarah. One thing that always fascinates me, and is worthy of inclusion in this process, with so many things going on, all the moving parts of moving country, the visa to buying the house, so many things, and sometimes the moving of the money is thought of as a bit of a given. I'll do that when I'm ready. But you've pointed out to me before now that it might be good to just think about the timing there and do it sooner rather than later. Because if you leave it till later and you have any hiccups, that could be quite disadvantageous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, when you obviously, hindsight is a great thing. You can look back on these graphs and say, oh, if I bought it then so there is always that. But again, if you leave yourself more time, then generally the rule of thumb is that you have more options available and you have more choices. You can choose to buy it at that point rather than thinking, oh, I wish I'd looked at this sooner. At least you have that choice. Yes. I mean, it's trivial to this, but I've just been to Florence at the weekend. Ooh. And I wish I'd bought my euros sooner. But it's, I mean,
okay.
Very, probably a few more drinks there or a meal difference. But, when you put it into perspective, if I was buying a property and the amount of money, I wish I'd bought it then.
Yes.
I didn't get myself into gear to sort that out. So
how was Florence, by the way?
Oh, it was lovely. Really recommend it.
Excellent. Okay, so for anyone coming from the rest of the world to Europe, what a lovely jumping off point Portugal will prove to be for you as you travel to places like Florence or London or Paris. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll go to some more personal questions in a hands up session after the recording ends. That's the beauty of being here tonight, live on the recording. You can get to ask our speakers more personal questions that you might not want on the recording. But is there anything I haven't asked you that needs to be included? Obviously, we need to know how to get started with Spartan FX, Sarah, as for one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the details, we'll put them in the chat, but they're on the directory. You can call us, email us. There's an inquiry form. You can get in touch with us very easily. Okay,
SpartanFX.co.uk though, not a .com, for getting in touch with Spartan FX. And as Sarah says there, go to our business directory at expatsportugal.com as well, or just reach out to me or to Astrid, and we'll make sure you get put in touch with Sarah. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we end the recording here, Sarah?
Yeah, there was just a couple of things actually. One, I did touch on it about sort of, things to consider is that, we really thoroughly check sort of the IBAN numbers, for example, just to make sure that we call lawyers, third parties, and make sure those details are correct for you as well. And that's key because, human error, an email sent by a lawyer, someone's put a digit in wrong, for example, we just really double check that all those details are correct so that your money's going to the right place. And we keep you up to date as well throughout the whole process, exactly where your money is. You can log on to the online platform and see it very much like your bank account, so you know that it's there. The other thing as well, which I've had recently, is what we've noticed in the last probably maybe 5 years is that banks have become they've heightened their security. So you may find that when you come to make a transfer to us or any third party, or even if you just didn't use us and transferred your money to an account in Portugal, they are asking more security questions around the accounts and the money that you're sending and about the companies that you're sending it to. Don't be put off by this. I know it can seem a bit like, oh, who am I sending my money to? But it is standard procedure. I'll give you an example. The company that I used to work with years ago, there was a colleague who worked with me who is Irish, and her mother was sending her money to her account. She had an account with the company that I was with at the time. And her Irish bank were sort of, are you sure you want to send this money? Are you sure that this company exists? And she's like, my daughter works for them, So, it was a legitimate, we are a legitimate company, we do exist, but the banks do ask those sort of questions, which can seem very daunting and you might raise a concern, but it is standard procedure at the moment. They're often asking more questions around third-party payments, which is understandable. But that's what that's there for. So if you're asked questions, don't be alarmed. If you're not sure how to answer them again, they ask different questions that you might not be sure how to answer those. We can help you with those as well.
You're so right, Sarah. These last, just in the last few months, it seems everything, every online account you have. Oh, we just want to do 27-factor ID check, and you're trying to get into your own stuff here. And also, another part of that, of course, is by creating the relationship, doing small transfers or doing a test transfer, you're setting the precedent for security and safety and ease of use as well, which you can do for people.
Yeah, and I think that goes nicely onto the last point, really. And again, I think I touched on it at the beginning, that thinking about doing this in advance isn't just about the rate and saving money, but it's actually ease of transfer. And that's something to always really think about before you move, is how am I going to move my money once I've left my home country? Because it generally happens when you come to do larger amounts. I think you might find that you've done some transfers when you're in your home country, say the US, for example, and it's gone fine. You're there, it's easy. Maybe you've moved and you're doing some smaller transfers and that's gone fine. But sometimes when you come to do larger amounts, that's when there's a bit more, they want you to come into branch. And this is what we've seen. We've seen banks be a little bit more difficult. And the last thing you want to do is have to get on a plane back to then help with those transfers. So the things that we've seen that people can do are, for some banks, you need an international card reader, which you can apply for in branch. Again, that it varies per bank. I think it's quite standard in the UK that we have the card readers where you put your card in and it's, again, like we were saying, just another authorization level. We've seen customers give power of attorney to friends and family. Again, that's entirely up to you and who you then trust as well with that. Is there any paperwork that you need to sign before you leave as well? Just double check and make sure that you put any account details that you need to on there. We had an example of a customer he's been traveling overseas since 2020. He comes from Canada, but he's spending a bit of time, I think, in Italy and South Africa, but he's moving to Portugal later this year. He's going to rent for a few months, and he said he's had some struggles with his bank in Canada, moving those kind of money. Even online banking has been a little bit difficult. Sometimes you'll find they have a limit on how much you do each day. So again, bear that in mind for the larger transfers. But one thing that he is doing, which is useful to know, is that he is selling a house in Canada. And when the house sale goes through, the money is going to be sent from his solicitor, his Canadian solicitor, to us. So it doesn't always have to necessarily come from your bank account. It can come from, say, it's a sale of a house, so it can come from a solicitor or some investments that you're liquidating. It could possibly come from them. Some brokerage accounts, we found they won't transfer, so it'll have to go into your main account first. So again, it can vary, but there may be some other solutions there that might make that a little bit easier for you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Is that the worst case scenario? People actually having to fly home?
It is, yes. So there was one client that we had that unfortunately the rate had moved a lot against him, and he still had to fly because of the time he was trying to get the money transferred, and he had to fly back, so the cost of his flight as well. So don't want to be in that.
Don't want to be in that situation. No, certainly
Definitely
not.
not. So
Sarah Davey, Spartan FX, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Going to stick around, I hope, to answer a few more of the personal questions after the recording has ended. If you want to be here live, so you can be part of the after party, if you like, and ask questions of our speakers, join us, join the webinars at expatsportugal.com and sign up via there. Sarah, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.